I remember when God first dropped it into my spirit. I remember when the idea first became implanted in my heart that I would buy a house and put my hair salon in it. I was excited, but I was surprised, I think would be the best way to describe it. I never ever wanted a hair salon in my house. I always said that I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to blur the lines of professionalism with my clients. I pictured them coming to my front door and disrupting my Sunday morning with my family, looking for church girls, wanting me to do their hair really quickly or give them a few curls. That was my 20-year-old mind at the time. But that was one of the reasons I never wanted to have my salon in my home. I didn't know that I could actually choose my target market client and that my target market client would be professional women that, like they have been for the last 30 years. I'm a hairstylist and I have been for the last 30 years. I am a second generation hairstylist. My paternal grandmother, Grandma Marie, was a hairstylist for more than 40 years. I always say that my gift of hair, my love of hair and people, was God-given and Grandma nurtured. When the desire was dropped into my heart and into my spirit, I was surprised because it was something I never wanted to do. My mom had just called me from North Carolina where she was visiting family and friends, and she had stopped by Cousin Barbara's house. Cousin Barbara was a hairstylist as well. Cousin Barbara had taken her garage and converted it into a salon. These are only things that you can do in North Carolina. New Jersey would never allow that to happen. But when you live in rural states and the lines and rules are softer and not as strict, you can do things like that. And so Cousin Barbara did, and she made her salon out of her garage. And my mother thought it was the cutest thing, and so she called me with such excitement, almost as if she knew that she was solving a problem that I hadn't really talked about. I wanted to have my own salon, but I wanted a family more. And I've always known how hard this industry could be on families because of the strong pull from clients and yourself as being a self-employed person. We know that when we don't eat, well, we don't work, we don't eat. And so that's always been the mindset. It was as if my mom knew that I could now have it all. I could have my cake and eat it too. And her excitement helped me to be excited, but I needed to see it for myself. So I made a trip to North Carolina to visit family and made a pit stop to Cousin Barbara's house. I would be lying if I told you that from the time Mom mentioned it to me until I actually got there, I hadn't thought about it again, but I actually thought about it every day. It was as if the idea was growing and settling into my spirit. When I walked into Cousin Barbara's salon, it was the cutest, most intimate space I had seen. I could feel the love for what she does and the intimacy with her clients, the one-on-one care. I could see it and feel it from the space, from the salon. And one of the first things that I noticed was the separation from the salon to the home. The salon attached to the house in a way that the kitchen was the dividing line between the salon and the home. And for a quick moment, I could visually, in my mind's eye, I could see a bassinet. I could see myself in the salon working and my baby in her bassinet in the kitchen at the door where I could monitor her while I worked. I really felt like this was something I could do. So after that experience and after settling in my spirit that this is exactly what I want to do, I began the chore of looking for a location. For 2 years, I drove up and down streets, in and out of neighborhoods in different towns, looking for the perfect house. I am like a dog with a bone. Once I know that I'm aligned with God and that this is something that He dropped in my spirit and it's something that I want, I am on it. God promises the desires of our hearts, and I know that He gives us the desires in our heart. And so I felt fully confident that I was going to find what I was looking for. I didn't know how I would find it. I didn't quite know that it even existed, but I knew that it's what I wanted, and I wasn't going to stop until I found it. I searched up and down different streets and neighborhoods looking for the perfect house, the perfect location, the perfect neighborhood, because I wanted it to be business enough that people would see me, but residential enough that my children could play on the street and have a good life. When I realized that the zoning laws were very different in New Jersey, I didn't know how it was going to affect my dream, but I still dreamed and I still believed God. I still trusted. I was looking for a house that maybe I could turn into a hair salon. Maybe it was an attorney's office. Maybe it was a house that had a dental office. I'd seen those years and years and years ago. But I just figured I would convert it. The zoning laws made it virtually impossible to do something like that. They didn't see cosmetology and salon owners or hairstylists as the same kind of a business that you would use to see as a doctor's office or an attorney's office. And so it was going to be a little bit more daunting to push that idea through. But I trusted God. If He put the desire in my heart, if I could dream it and see it in my mind's eye, which I could, I knew that I could have it. And it was just a matter of time. I was patient. I would spend my lunch hours driving in and out of towns, in and out of neighborhoods. And my sister was a newer realtor at the time. And I remember her calling me one day. And I remember her telling me that they had slipped a new listing in her mailbox, in her professional mailbox. And the listing was a house with a hair salon built into it, attached to the home. I couldn't even believe that it actually existed. I remember the excitement in my belly. It had been 2 years, and I thought it would take maybe 6 months. I had no idea it would take 2 years. But God's time is not our time, and God needed it to be the perfect time, and so it was. And so we started the process of acquiring this house. This house was expensive. It was a fixer-upper, but the price didn't reflect the fact that it was a fixer-upper. And where my husband and I, in hindsight now, in our much older minds, I think I was 28, or maybe I was 31 when we bought this house, and my husband was in his 30s. We didn't know or didn't think that we could negotiate, so we didn't. And so we paid a $385,000, 385,000 whole American dollars for a fixer-upper, where the owner intended to do nothing but walk away. And so we bought the house. But in the process of buying the house, it just wasn't that easy. There were different roadblocks and hindrances that were trying to stop us from actually acquiring this property. But we pushed on. I put the word of God on it. I stood on the word of God. I stood on the promises of God. I knew that His word was yes and amen. I was a new Christ follower. I grew up Muslim, and so I didn't know much about Christ outside of an ex-boyfriend whose family was amazing and introduced me to Christ. And I felt called from that moment. But I was a new believer, and I was just believing really big and didn't know how to believe any other way. And so I knew this house would be ours, but I stood on the word. And my husband and I locked arms, and my act of faith would be to drive to the property every day. Every day, either before work or after work, I would drive over to this property. Sometimes I would sit in the parking lot across the street from the house, in the gymnastics parking lot, and I would shine the lights. I would high beam the house across the street, and I would look at it and I would say, there's the bedroom, and over there is where the baby's room is going to be. And on this side this is the backyard where my children are going to play, our children are going to play. And so I would just sit there and I would dream about the house and the idea of being in the house long before we actually bought the house. I believed that that house was ours, and so I would just visualize myself there and visualize myself, and my family in the house, and, doing all the things that you do when you own a house. And some days my act of faith would be to go onto the property, to actually walk on the property. There was a mailbox on the corner of the house, and it was a very popular mailbox. Apparently the post office picked up frequently from that location because there was quite a bit of traffic, so it wasn't uncommon to see people all the time going to that mailbox. And so every day, if I wasn't looking at the house from the gymnastics parking lot, I would actually walk on the property and pretend to mail something. My goal was just to walk on the property and speak the word of God over the property. I believe the scripture was Joshua 1:3, where it says, "Everywhere the soles of your feet shall tread, that's the land that I've given you." And so I believed, and we believed, and my husband and I bought the property in September of 2003, and we were just so excited. When I tell you this house was a fixer-upper, it was a fixer-upper. We didn't even have a kitchen for almost 2 years. We had a mini refrigerator in our bedroom, and we lived off a toaster oven. We cooked from a toaster oven. But we didn't have children yet, and by the time the children came, things were better. But we had a salon, and we had a place to grow, and a place to build, and a place where we could have children. And so when we bought the property, I remember in the bush in front, on the front lawn, there was a family of bunnies. And I remember during that time, I also had issues with conceiving. I don't know that they were actual issues, or if I was stressing myself and my body out, wanting it so bad. But my husband and I at that point were married for 8 years, and we still hadn't had children, and we had been trying for at least 6. We had one miscarriage on my 30th birthday. And instead of being really sad about that, I remember thanking God that at least my body was working. At least I knew that it was working. And so we just believed that we would have a family in this house that we just bought. And so in 2005, our oldest was born. And my family babysat for a while. And then my husband and I hired a babysitter. And it was just the best feeling to be able to be at home with my baby, nurse her, love up on her, watch her grow, and go downstairs and work while the babysitter cared for her upstairs. It was just a perfect setup. My clientele was amazing. They were all moms and women, and professional women, lawyers and doctors and attorneys, and some stay-at-home moms, but mostly professional women who had a heart for being a family woman. And so they understood where I was in that season of my life. Mothering was the most important thing that I wanted to do at that particular time. And so I remember I would put my clients under the dryer, and while they had a 45-minute drying time, I would be able to go upstairs and tell the babysitter, "Don't give her the bottle today or right now. Let me nurse her." And I would go up, and we would have that time, and I would get to nurse them. And so we had our second daughter 5 years later in 2010. It was the same setup still, and I was able to just love up on my babies and just give them all the mommy time and attention that I could in between work. They would come down for visits in the salon, and all the salon aunties would just love up on them, and they would run through the salon in their walkers when they were old enough, and then they would sneak out from upstairs and come down to visit mommy. It was just the best setup, and I had that salon for probably 13 years. In 2010, when our youngest was born, within a year and a half, I just knew something was different with her. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but my spiritual discernment was just up, and that intuition that God gives us. And I'm not sure what he gives to the dads, and I know he gives them something, but I know what he gives to the mom. And when something pricks your spirit and something is up in the spirit, you know when something is just different. And so I began to look at her and wonder and ask God, why doesn't she do what our oldest did? And how come she isn't doing, wasn't hitting all the milestones, but they weren't so off, but they were off enough that I could tell that something was up. My husband kept thinking that everything was fine, and I would want to go along with him, and so I would go along with him. And then I would look and go, no, she should be doing this, or she shouldn't be doing that. And so probably by the time she was 18 months, we had decided to call early intervention and to have her tested, and just to make sure that she was okay. And she was determined to have a developmental delay. And by that time, she was probably a little over 2, maybe closer to 2.5. And if you know anything about early intervention, they age out at 3 years old. So after 3 years old is a whole other program, if there's a program. But the goal was to get her on track and to get her as much help as we could, before she aged out, which was about 6 months from the time that we started. When she was not diagnosed with the developmental delay, I had to honestly say that I tanked. I tanked. I was sad. I was confused. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what she could do and what she couldn't do. How would she be able to live in this world with the delay, and what does it mean? I just didn't understand it, and I went into this sort of depression. The depression on one side, where I just wanted to put my head in the sand, but on the other side, I didn't want our baby to grow up without have given her the help that she needs to survive and given her a chance and trust in God. But I just didn't have it in me to give to her in the way that she needed to, and my clients in the way that they needed to. And so I tanked. I didn't handle it right. I know it now in hindsight, but in the moment, I stopped answering my business phone. And the clients that had been with me for years and years and years stayed with me, but I didn't get any new clients. And any new clients that I had acquired before the developmental delay, I couldn't nurture them in the way that I'm used to nurturing my clients. And so they kind of went away. And so I lost a lot of business. I stopped answering my phone for probably 6 months. I just couldn't serve from an empty cup. I had nothing else to give. I had just enough to give my baby and to help her move along and to grow. At that same time, my husband's job, this was during that time when a lot of houses were foreclosing and people were losing their jobs, and it was a bit of a recession. And my husband lost his job, and he was out of work for an entire year. So between that and trying to maintain the mortgage and trying to keep our baby's therapies up, and at one time there was 5 therapists every week in our house. And we just sacrificed so much to get her to the help that she needed before she aged out of this program. And I just remember the sadness in my heart. And I remember trying to keep up with everything. And I remember feeling like I couldn't keep up with everything. And I had been a stylist at that point for many years, but I worked in my salon alone. So I didn't even have that iron sharpen iron thing where, there was another stylist in the salon with me. I worked alone, and for the time that I did, I loved it. The last 2 years of that time got really difficult, but I think it was because I was just really sad. And I'm not someone who vomits on my clients. My guests I'm there for them. They're not there for me. I'm there for them, and I want to be the sense of encouragement and uplifting that I've always been. And so I tried to maintain that, and I was able to fake it until I make it. I was able to be what I needed to be for them. And they loved me, and they had been with me for many years, so their expectations of me weren't as high as a new client's would be. And so I worked, and we tried to save our house, and it was just, everything was just crashing down. And I remember filing bankruptcy to try to save the home. And then I remember when we got the phone call, and the mortgage person on the other end said, "Stop paying your mortgage. They're not gonna do another modification for you. You're gonna have to leave the home. You're gonna have to short sell, or they're gonna go into the foreclosure process." And I just felt like the air was taken out of me. This house was a dream that I felt like I birthed in the spirit, that it was something that I wanted so bad, and I worked in the spirit so hard for, and I prayed over it, and I believed for it. And it wasn't even just about me. I remember when we were buying the house thinking, because it was such a hard time to acquire the space, I remember thinking that there was a 5 or 6-year-old little girl who had a dream of doing hair like I did. And one day she was going to want to have her own salon, and want to have a family as well. And I would be able to sell this house with a salon to her, because the house was grandfathered in. And so as long as it remained a salon, for years to come, it could be a salon. But if, for any reason, the house was sold and it didn't stay a salon, it could never be a salon again. And so my heart was really to be able to sell this house to another salon and keep the legacy of being able to work from home and have a family and have a business and live that kind of a life where you don't miss all the special moments and all the basketball games with your children and all the dance recitals and the time with your family that this industry is so quick to snatch from you if you're not careful. I was able to have it all, and I wanted the next person to have it all as well. And so when we went into the foreclosure process, my heart was crushed. I felt so lost. I felt so sad. I felt it was just one of the darkest places that I had been. And I remember hoping that it took a long time for the process to continue. And I just remember as it got closer and closer to having to leave the salon, I decided to work in another salon. I didn't want to be surprised. I didn't want to be surprised at the feeling of having to work in another salon at the same time as the house was being taken away from us, or we were losing the house. I wasn't just losing the house, I was losing the house, I was losing the business. And I was having to tell everybody that I had to go and tell them a story that wasn't the whole story because it wasn't anyone's business, but I had to tell them that I was selling the house, and I had to act like it was something that I wanted to happen when I really didn't. Oh, it was just the darkest place. And I just remember going to work at a salon, um, maybe 6 months, but maybe no, less than 6 months, maybe 4 months before I was actually set to leave the house. And I remember the day there was supposed to be a notice that was going to be placed in your mailbox that let you know as it got closer to the short sale, or the actually it wasn't even a short sale, as it got closer to the sheriff sale. That's what it was, a sheriff sale. And just feeling so lost and unsure, and having to uproot my children from the home that we brought them home from the hospital, and from the home that they've lived in all their lives, the way that they've lived with the mommy downstairs, being able to go to their programs at school just around the corner while my clients were under the dryer. Just this disruption of life that was going to happen to them. I could be okay with what was happening to me and my husband because we're big people, we're grown-ups, right? But I didn't like that it was going to affect them. It just didn't feel fair. But I remember being a kid of a divorce, and I remember knowing that as long as mommy was okay, everything was okay. And so I tried to put the brave face on. I went to work at Hair Chalet. I went to work at a different salon. And it was at that salon that I was able to kind of rest my spirit and get an idea of my next. I'd always had this heart for serving my clients and serving people and making people feel really welcome. And the house was more than just a salon. It was like home. It was like home. They took their shoes off when they came in. They put their feet up and watched Food Network while they waited for their turn to get their hair done. And so it was a wonderful place to work, and now it was time to go. And I remember when we had to leave, and my best friend, one of my best friends who lives in Puerto Rico now, spent the last 3 weekends helping us to pack up and move out of the house. And it was just the saddest time. I remember having to go to the Superior Courthouse and file an extension to be able to stay for 2 more weeks in our house that we believed in and believed for. And I just remember the saddest feeling, and feeling like the end. It was just the end of I don't know what, but I kept trying to hold on to the fact that I had my husband, we had our children, we were healthy, we were whole, and it was time to go. So we left the house. We moved to another house across town. God gave us exactly what we had prayed for in that house. And when I moved into the other salon fully, it was there that I realized how much I loved what I used to do in serving my guests. I realized it was called something. It's called the guest experience, and it's called making your clients feel welcomed and cared for. And I said that I would never open up another business again unless I had a business coach. And it was in that space that I actually acquired a business coach. And she was a business coach just for hairstylists. And I spent the next 4 years rebuilding myself, my spirit, my brand, reconnecting with God, because I felt like I let his hand go when I got so busy with the things of the house and the things of the business, that I let his hand go and I didn't realize I did. And so I reconnected with everything that I needed to reconnect, to rebuild, and I vowed to reinvent myself. That was just a word that God kept dropping in my spirit: reinvent, reinvent. And so with this business coach, with this new idea of loving up on my guests and making them feel welcomed and wanted and cared for, my business grew. My business grew, my clientele grew, and I completely turned it around in God. And I'm making more money than I could have dreamed. I've doubled my income, and I'm now in a position to own my own salon again. I'm actually going to move into my own salon space at the end of July. And it's just been the darkest, most rewarding time of my life. My girls are happy. My husband is happy. We're happy. We live in a home that's safe and comfortable without all the crazy overhead of owning a home and a business and it being a fixer-upper and never feeling like I can get on top of it. And I realize now that that season didn't happen to me. It actually happened for me because it was in that season of darkness that I reconnected with God. It was in that season of darkness that I found my new purpose and my new desire to elevate the guest experience and welcome my guests and teach other stylists because it's something that's missing in our community. The way stylists take care of their guests or the lack of is missing in our community. And it's something that I want to bring to other stylists who might be struggling and feeling like I did. I was thinking I would leave the industry. I didn't know what my next was going to be. I felt like I had lost it. I felt like the gift that God had given me and grandma had nurtured was no longer. And my grandmother wasn't there for me to talk to. She had passed away at that point. And so it wasn't until I got into this dark place and got out of the dark place and got into a new space that I realized why it all happened and that nothing is lost in God. And that if there's another stylist out there, hair salon owner or hairstylist who has a desire to up-level their business and want to grow their business and grow their clientele and make the changes that they need to make, I can show them how to do it because I did it. I remember being the only hairstylist in the salon, and I remember having 2 clients. I remember there were days when I didn't have any clients. And before that, I had never had a slow season. So to go from never having a slow season to being completely slow and not making any money and struggling to help pay the rent, the mortgage, and feed the family, and family having to help us, and then ultimately losing it all, only to rebuild it, reinvent, and come back stronger and better. And God, I know that I can help the next person do it. I know that I can. I have so many tricks up my sleeve, and every day I think about ways to wow my guests. My guests, that the ones that stayed with me, that had been with me for a long time, have been with me for almost 26, 27 years of my 30-year career. And so when I told them that we were going to be moving from the space that we're in, that has loved me and nurtured me for the last 5 years and helped me grow, when I told them, Tammy was the one that said it best. When I said that we were moving back into our own space, she turned quickly to me and she said, we're going home. That's it. That feeling of knowing that they felt for our salon space what I felt for it, it was home. And so now I get to welcome them home. Now I get to welcome them home, and I want to teach other hairstylists and salon owners how to perfectly welcome their guests, how to retain their dream client, how to keep them for years to come, and make the income they've always dreamed. I look forward to launching my course. I look forward to working with people who feel like they are stuck or in a rut or don't know which way to turn. I know that in God, these experiences that I've had were not in vain. They were designed to help me grow, to help me realize that I'm much stronger in God than I ever thought I could be. That house that I believed for, that was absolutely supposed to be for us, was for a season. It was for a season, and the season is past, and my girls benefited. My husband and I benefited from being there with them and loving up on them, and they had those experiences. And now it's time to move on to the next. And one of the things that I remember the most about this experience was I felt like in my spirit that God was saying to me, nothing is forever but me. Nothing is forever but me. And in God, we can do all things. So if you're a struggling hairstylist, if you're a struggling salon owner, know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. Know that you have to find your secret sauce, and I think I found it. And I want to help you find your secret sauce. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Bayina Marbury, wife of 24 years, mommy to 2 beautiful girls, and hairstylist for 30 years. I look forward